Right now, as we like to do on Mondays, we are going to talk politics with Aaron Van Allen, professor of government there at Liberty University. Aaron, good morning. Welcome back to the program.
Brian, Mary, and Biscuit, thanks so much for having me back this morning.
Now, let me know, when you heard these words last night, were you like Biscuit? Did you having to cry yourself to sleep?
And the Oscar goes to Michael B. Jordan.
Biscuit was very sad that Timothée Chalamet did not win the Best Actor Oscar. What did you think?
Watch the Oscars.
No, unfortunately, I felt like I was going to do something better with my time, like read a book. So So unfortunately, I missed it.
You go, Aaron.
Well, I guess that's better than just wallowing in sadness over the fate of poor little Timothée. Now, so you all right back there, Anthony? What? He just has just no idea whatsoever. All right, so let's talk about the state of the General Assembly right now. First up, got out of there with no budget. Now, that's not as big as it might be. We're in that second year of the cycle, so we do have a budget. We just don't have the amendments to it. And this is Democrats fighting each other here. Louise Lucas, Finance Committee Chairman in the Senate, taking on the governor and the speaker over these sales tax breaks for data centers. She wants to get rid of them. She wants the other $2 billion a year to spend. They don't want to lose the jobs associated with them, and they want to bring more into the state. The senator certainly looks like she's dug in on this. What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, I think that it really is. It's going to come down to a few consequential issues that ultimately is going to decide whether or not or how much of this budget actually moves forward. I think it's also important, before we look at the budget, I think it's also important to remember the exact date that the General Assembly is going to reconvene is on April the 23rd, and we all know what's happening right around that time period. So it seems like everything just wants to happen right there at the end of April. But I think it's going to come down to a few. I think it's going to come down to a few separate issues that Democrats in the General Assembly are going to have to make some concessions on. And right now it seems like there's, as you mentioned, Brian, there's kind of two camps. You have Louise Lucas on one side, and then you have the governor, and then you have the speaker on the other side as well. And I think that you're going to have areas, say, for example, like the taxes on the data centers themselves. I think that's going to be a big one. That's ultimately going to come into play. And if you look at that, especially if you look at data centers right now, there's a lot of information that's really going around, number one, about how much money or how much the tax incentives would push away as far as revenue is concerned. You have Senator Lucas that's giving you one figure, but then on the other side you have the speaker and you have the governor that are giving a number as well. The one that continuously gets thrown around is right around is about $2 billion, anywhere between 1.9 and $2 billion in taxes that the state would ultimately forego. And obviously that's a lot of money. And if you look at the voting record of Senator Lucas, she doesn't like to, if there's any money to be made, she wants to make it. And so she's really dug herself in on that. But I think that they are, in fact, going to have to, I think that they are going to have to come to some concessions. But also, if you look at some of the voting on other issues, say, for example, like gaming as well, or gambling, excuse me. The skilled games conversation, that's one that's ultimately coming to fruition as well because of a lot of the localities, say, for example, like in Fairfax County, that have either increased or decreased their overall skill game opportunities as well. You've also had some disagreements amongst Democrats as well as to what exactly the governor means by affordability. And there's been several different bills where the governor has said, well, if you pass this specific piece of legislation, say, for example, with housing, then that's going to help overall housing costs. But if you look at Democrats in the Fairfax area and in the Northern Virginia area, they look at that same piece of legislation and they say, well, it's not necessarily going to do that. If anything, we could potentially have another situation like what Mamdani has done in New York City that's ultimately going to push prices for housing up, and obviously that's not affordable. So I think that you have these two camps for Democrats that before you have Democrats and Republicans that go into any type of a conference session or conference committee to try to reconcile these differences, Democrats are going to have to do that in their own house to figure out what they're going to do. But right now it seems like Senator Lucas that she's not going to push back on anything, or she's not going to relent on anything, She's really dug her heels into this. So I'm really interested to see what play the Speaker and the Governor are going to make to try to get her on board and convince her to push this thing forward.
Yeah, I mean, is it as simple as saying, "Look, Louise, we'll meet you in the middle. We'll go from $2 billion to $1 billion, and there we go. You've got an extra $1 billion."
Yeah, one would think. One would think that, and it's kind of like in my government 405 class that I instruct here at Liberty when we talk about global population growth, and we say, well, we know that the number is accurate when we give or take 1 billion people on the planet. It really shows the state of the Commonwealth that we're in right now. When somebody says, well, give or take $1 billion, that really. If you'll just come on board, you'll get what you want. But I think Senator Lucas, I think that she has higher political aspirations, and she has a lot of backing right now as well. And so I think that she's really going to dig her heels in so that she has a record that later on down the line that some of her very ardent supporters will continue to get behind of her, obviously throw some campaign funds, et cetera, et cetera.
Speaking with Aaron Van Allen on the Morning Line. He's a professor of government at Liberty University. And I saw this came out from Cardinal News on Friday as far as early voting. And the trends are, it looks like you're getting much more in the more rural areas and the more, frankly, gerrymandered areas of the state. Now, I knew that this doesn't have mail-in ballots, which tend to run Democratic, and Northern Virginia is always going to be a little slow, but for people who are contesting this referendum, can they take something out of this? Maybe they think they've got some good news?
Yeah, I think that there is a moderate amount of good news that folks can take from this. Here's the one thing that we do have to remember about this early voting across the Commonwealth is that Virginia actually leads the nation as far as the number of days before Election Day that voters can actually cast a ballot. So to put that in perspective, we at 45 days, in comparison to somewhere like California, they only vote 3 days in advance. Now, California is much more relaxed when it comes to mail-in ballots and things of that nature, but that kind of gives you an overall idea of just how far out we are allowed to vote in the Commonwealth. The reason that I bring that up is that we don't really have a tremendous amount of data at present that really gives a lot of political scientists or a lot of academics or folks that are doing this every day to really say, okay, these are the specific areas in which we could say, okay, if there's high voter or if there's high early ballots that are cast in this specific area, then that's going to be good news for one side or the other. And then you take into account the fact that we have very, very different districts that are being proposed right now as well. And that throws a completely different wrench in the conversation. Essentially, what I'm saying is that there's not a tremendous amount of precedence or data to make a really educated decision in that regard. Now, I will say this, that I think if you look at the very rural areas of the Commonwealth and you see that where you see that they're running ahead of where they were in 2025, just like that Cardinal News article pointed out, I think that that's very good news. I think the earlier on that you see folks voting, the better news it's going to be for folks that are on the no side of the ballot. The reason being is that the closer we get to Election Day, that's how we know that, or we obviously know that not only are folks going to be casting those mail-in ballots, but also they're going to be voting early as well. So if you look in places, say, like in Southwest Virginia, in comparison to places in Northern Virginia, that's where you begin to see that those rural localities are trending ahead of, say, for example, like you mentioned, Brian, places like Fairfax County or even Northern Virginia as well. So I do think that there is a moderate amount of enthusiasm that voters in those rural areas can take. And quite frankly, it's because you have those individuals, say, for example, like Congressman Ben Cline, that has established his grassroots organization that's attempting to get the word out. It really seems to see that Republicans are trying to hit the ground running and really start off with a lot of momentum to get an early lead, to build that momentum with their base, to try to motivate more folks to get out to the polls.
Aaron, last week, the division on city council the division among Republicans was on full display with just a lot of shouting, a lot of interruptions, a lot of name calling. What do you make of it, and how is all of that, as far as you know, going to play out? I know the Lynchburg Republican City Committee has a big meeting this week. How is that going to play out, do you think?
Yeah, I think if you're talking about the Lynchburg Republican City Committee, I think that it's really just going to follow the very. I think it's going to do the same thing that it has done for the past couple of years. I think that there's going to be a lot of support behind the typical. Behind a lot of the typical candidates that we've seen over the past several years. Now, obviously, we haven't had everybody that has declared for re-election just yet, so we're going to see ultimately what comes from that this evening. But I'm not really expecting the Lynchburg Republican City Committee just to tact and say, well, we're going to have a big tent, we're going to have a big umbrella where we're going to accept all Republicans and do this, and this. I'm expecting it to be a much more homogenized and much more narrower approach of this is the brand of conservatism that we are going to support. We're going to support the candidates that we believe fall into that category, and if you don't, then we're just not going to consider you. And so, I think that's ultimately I think it's really just going to be same song, different verse that we've seen over the past couple of years.
Yeah, we're hearing that they could very well change the rules or change the process by which one is a member of the LRCC, and then they would be able to say that council members Reed, Feraldi, and Taylor are not Republicans.
Yeah, and that wouldn't surprise me. And quite frankly, that's actually what I would expect. That's not really shocking news to me. It's this brand of conservatism that is not new, but it is one that has gained popularity over the past 10 years, and it's inherently this concept of who is the purest Republican, who is a true Republican, and we are going to define what that is. We're not going to accept any other definition of that, and if you don't fit into that narrative, then we're inherently going to call you an establishment figure. We're going to call you a rhino. We're going to call you all of these different names that could ultimately come into fruition. But it wouldn't surprise me if those actions ultimately came into fruition.
Aaron Van Allen, Liberty University. Are you all having classes today?
We are actually on spring break.
Oh, that's right.
But nonetheless, I am sitting in the beautiful Jerry Falwell Library right now, getting a little reading done and prepping for next week when students return. So very thankful to be back on this beautiful campus today.
Do you ever take a break, Aaron?
Yeah, I slept for a few hours with the baby last night.
Aw, he had to think for a minute. Do I take a break? Well, we hope you have a great spring break with your family, and it sounds like you're still hard at work. And we'll talk to you again next week.
Absolutely, Mary Brian Biscuit. You guys be safe today, and your listeners be safe as well.